Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat with Dr. Foojan.
Break free from the forces holding you back. Get the life you deserve. Eliminate stress, reduce anxiety, decrease depression, and start living your full potential. Thousands have used Dr. Foojan Zeine's awareness integration theory, an evidence-based behavioral health breakthrough with incredible life-changing results. Getting rid of past trauma, having fulfilling relationships, increasing earnings, and living their best life. Now, the Foojan app is available to everyone. The app is Dr. Foojan Zeine's awareness integration theory in the palm of your hand. Download the Foojan app today.
Do you wish to wake up one day and hit the Life Reset button? Life Reset, the awareness integration path to create the life you want by Dr. Foojan Zeine, helps you navigate crucial life areas, heal the past traumas, and cultivate fulfilling relationships and careers. Life Reset is your guide to a profound journey to reshape your life. Grab your copy on Amazon or Audible now and embark on a path to a more joyous and fulfilled life.
Welcome to Inner Voice, a heartfelt chat podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Foojan Zeine, a psychotherapist and author and the originator of the awareness integration theory. I am thrilled to have you join us today for an amazing conversation about how to get trained as a supervisor. Many of us don't, and we're just kind of thrown in the role. So in this episode, I chat with Dr. Bakhshandeh. He's an accomplished business manager known widely as a dynamic writer, speaker, personal and professional development coach. He's been a trainer for over 30 years in implementing his passion, visionary leadership skills. He produces extraordinary results in record time. Dr. Bakhshandeh brings his broad experience and successful track record to each project. It involves personal development, implementing customer-focused programs, integrating technologies, and redesigning operational core processes or delivering strategic initiative. He's also the founder and president of Primeco Education, a coaching and consulting company that has worked with individuals, teams, and organizations since 1993. Up to date, he has authored and published 10 books on topics related to personal and professional development and industry and personal and professional coaching and high performance. My other guest, which I'm so honored to have also, is Dr. William Rothwell. He is the president of Rothwell Associate and a consultant. He has worked with over 50 multinational companies and countless governments and nonprofits. As a distinguished professor at Penn State University Park, where he has taught for 30 years. He's a co-professor in charge of an online and on-site academic program that offers a master's degree program in organizational development and PhD in workforce education and development, with an emphasis in talent development, organization, and development. Now, before joining Penn State, Dr. Rothwell in 1993 had over 15 years of executive level work experience in human resources, talent development and organizational development, leadership in government and private sector. So he has published 164 books in the human resources field. I'm going to share Dr. Eileen Zabario with you. She's not going to be with us today. She's been on my show before, but she is the co-author of the book we're going to be talking about. She is also a senior partner at Rothwell and Associate, and with a dual PhD in workforce education and comparative international education in Penn State. She has over 27 years of experience in learning and development field and more than 10 years researching with adults. Learn how they know it and how the value placed on types of knowledge that they have. So today we will be actually talking about their latest book, which is a part of a 5-book series. It's going to be about the inclusive, empathic, and relational supervisor, managing diverse employees through interpersonal relationships. So we have stories, we share, about our experiences. They share, Dr. Bakhshandeh Rothwell share also from different angles of how to look at supervisory. What do they have to go through, and what is it that they actually need to get trained on so they have an easier life for themselves and their employees and the company. So I'm positive you'll enjoy the conversation as much as I have. Now, be sure to subscribe to this podcast, my YouTube channel, connect with me, through my website, foojanzeine.com, any of my social media, and share your thoughts with me and the ideas that you have and conversations or questions. I'd love to hear from you. Now, without further ado, here are Dr. Bakhshandeh and Dr. Rothwell.
Intentional Parenting, a practical guide to awareness integration theory, written by Dr. Jafari, Dr. Foojan Zeine, and Dr. Manoukian, three experts in human development, is your step-by-step guide to raising a healthy child prepared for a culturally integrated world. You're supported in parenting infants to adolescents using the latest evidence-based scientific research on parenting. Order your copy on Amazon now.
Eliminate stress, reduce anxiety, and decrease depression. Dr. Foojan Zeine's awareness integration theory has helped thousands like you get incredible life-changing results. The Foojan app gives you her evidence-based treatment in the palm of your hand. Download today.
Well, I am so excited to have Dr. Rothwell and Dr. Bakhshandeh again on our podcast. I get excited every time I get an email from Dr. Bakhshandeh that says, next month we have another release. Next month we have another release. And I'm like, your team is busy. And
We are.
I know
We are.
every time I look at the books and the structure of the books, and I learn so much from them and I get excited. So thank you for
Welcome.
all that you guys are doing, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Foojan. It's always so nice of you that allow us to introduce our products. As you said, between Dr. Rothwell, me, and 2 to 6 other team members, we have, as a team, publishing average of 7 books a year, and we already have contract all the way to 2027. And now we just keep telling Dr. Rothwell, please stop accepting invitations to write books. Taking all of our time, but it's very nice to be able to express our knowledge, our passion, and making a difference.
Yes. Dr. Rothwell, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, and we're delighted to be here as we were before, and we're passionate about every topic we choose to write about, but this topic on supervision is particularly clear to our hearts because this is a topic that we believe for most workers, the supervisor is the organization. They are the company. The supervisor, your immediate boss, is your representative of the organization. So we believe if we can improve that relationship, we can improve people's work lives.
Very much, yes. So everyone, we are going to be talking about their latest book, The Inclusive, Empathic, and Relational Supervisor, Managing Diverse Employees Through Interpersonal Relationship. So obviously the landscape of work has changed a lot after the pandemic.
Yes.
And there's a variety of ways that we actually have the supervisors working with their employees, right? So some of them are doing remote work. Their technology has really advanced. There's a diverse workforce. And so it's important to really see what is it that an employee needs. Now, we know at this point that employees don't want to even go back to work. And there's a lot of struggle between the employers that say that they need to even hire people, or even the employers that say you need to come back and don't even do hybrid, just be 100%. And we're seeing this pushback that is happening. But I can also see how difficult it is for supervisors that when there was a setup, there was a meeting, they would see body language on people, they just walked through the corridors. So there was so much of interaction when people were in the same office versus now having people across the world, kind of just being together once in a while. And so the landscape of the way that a person does supervision is different. The other piece that I also see a lot in your book and in the world is the concept of taking people's feelings into account. Where before, a lot of times it was like, you know, you don't cry in baseball. Forget it. Like emotions have nothing to do. That's for your home. Do it after hours. Suck it up, and you got to do the work, and get in and do it. And even that landscape has changed, because now there's an expectation for your supervisors to listen to you and be with you and hear you, understand you, look at exactly what you are best at, and motivate you and bring the best of you out. So there's a lot of change, and there's a lot of stress and expectations that are changing. So I can see why you needed to write this book, and thank you for doing it. So can you explain a bit about this?
Sure. That's why it's five book series, because originally this was the thought and child thought of Dr. Rothwell since 40 years ago, and he brought it up that we can actually start writing about this supervisory, especially there's a big transition between 19th century supervisory scales and techniques to the 20th centuries and now 21st centuries with interaction of COVID and hybrid lifestyle or work style. This made it very complicated that if you want to put every competencies, modern competencies of effective supervisor, this book will be 2,000 pages. So we decided with the partnership and work with the publisher, Taylor and Francis, we were kind of conscious about they might not accepting book series, right? And they accepted, actually, they were very excited about it. Then we start writing down the backbone of the books. What are we talking about? What are the main competencies of effective supervisory leadership? If you notice, we don't concentrate on manufacturing or IT business or health industry. Supervisory skills is a combination that works everywhere. That's why I emailed you that framework. The picture that I sent you is the background of the first book. That is, thank you. The title is Successful Supervisory Leadership, the Positive and Influential Supervisor. That is the main book, the beginning of the book. Then this book, as you see the white area, inclusive, empathetic, and relational supervisor. And actually the third book is coming out early next year, organized and engaged supervisor. And the fourth book is agile, innovative, and resilient supervisor. And the fifth book will concentrate on ethics and value base. This way, we kind of divided all these skills and competencies in 5 different books, and we always use academic awareness and professional practices that Dr. Rothwell have done in the last 50 years. So that work up very well about this book, that we try to influence the supervisory industry in all different industries.
Yeah, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are 600,000 people in the United States who bear the job title of supervisor. And of course, we know that that's just a tiny fraction of the real number of supervisors, because there are a lot of people who have job titles where they are supervisors, but they don't bear the exact title of supervisor. So the number is hard to pin down exactly how many people bear that title. And I did a search, how many supervisors are there globally, and there are no figures available on that. But we know that if there are at least 600,000 in the United States, there must be many times that number worldwide. And so it begs the question, where do those supervisors get training? how are they trained to be supervisors? And we know a big component of the work of supervisors is dealing with employees. Unfortunately, many schools, universities, and colleges that teach business do not really teach supervision. And I have a story to tell about that. Years ago, when I was a graduate student pursuing my MBA degree, I asked one of my business professors, when I'm finished, what am I trained to do? And he said, be a stockbroker. And I said, what? What's that got to do with managing people? And he said, well, absolutely nothing. Why would you assume that a degree in business would qualify you to manage human beings? That's a true story. So it begs the question, where do supervisors get training to be supervisors? And in the company I used to work for before I became a professor, remember, I had 20 years of experience in HR before I became a professor.
When I was just a child. Yeah, I understand.
And one of our managers said, in this company, when we name someone a supervisor, we turn their desk around over the weekend and we issue them a red cape and red boots so that they become a supervisor. And of course, he was saying that sarcastically, indicating that the company had done absolutely nothing to prepare people for the role of supervisor. So it begs the question, where do people learn to be supervisors if they don't get it in business school and they don't get it by the company? Where do they pick it up? And my answer to that is, without the professional training that you get in these books, most people get trained in supervision by watching their bosses. That can be a scary thought, because if your boss is a good supervisor, you will be a good supervisor because you had a good role model. But if your boss was a terrible supervisor, what do you think you will turn out to be? And so that's what we're trying to address in this book, is give people some guidance, practical guidance, on what it really takes to be an effective supervisor. And particularly in the second book, where we're looking at interpersonal skills, that is so important. If you have looked at some of the surveys done of modern business leaders, the number one complaint they have about fresh college graduates is that they have terrible interpersonal skills. They are wonderful dealing with technology. They know how to deal with every gizmo and gadget, but they do not know how to work face to face with other human beings. And so this is one of the challenges we're trying to address in this new book.
It's so important because I remember when I had my agency, and I've worked with hospitals. So a lot of people who worked for me were all mental health workers and therapists. But it's very different when they are with a client than they are in a corporation, because when you are in a corporation, the structure is a structure of work. And I realized very clearly and very early on that that's the same relationship that I had with my clients. I almost had to duplicate that as a supervisor, because we still needed to deal with human personality, human emotion, human behavior, human motivation. And it didn't matter. And I think most people who have, a couple of children, they have that experience that they love their children, but their children are not necessarily they're going to have their sibling rivalry. They're going to need motivation to go to school, and how you do your parenting, either creates a chaotic home, or it's going to facilitate a healthy home. And a lot of times I've watched corporations to do the same thing. It's almost like, you've got to have the parental role model of wanting to care for the people that they are your supervisee, but also each person. I think that depending on where they come from and what family system they come from, they bring their own kind of interrelatedness. One thing that was interesting as I was reading your book is you had brought this concept that, people who are a little bit older, they will take direction from authority in a whole different way than, someone who is at their age 50 or 40 or 30 or 20. And depending on the culture they grew up, they will coordinate and collaborate with their coworkers in a particular way, or receive information and direction. So it was very interesting to see how a supervisor who might be leading a team of a diverse group from different cultures, from different ages, to have to really take all of these matters into account in order to have a cohesive group, which then leads to a collaboration between team members. Can you share a little bit about that area?
Well, I think, first of all, what you say is absolutely correct. We, as a parent, we also have this issue with the older children and the middle children or younger children, because they raise in a different culture, different world environment. Like right now, my first daughter is 43 almost, and she's dealing with a 12 years old son who's all to IT and social media and games and this stuff. And it's not the way she grew and deal with parenting, right? Especially with a father like me, very militant and very black and white and disciplinary. I see this issue less on the small businesses, mom and pop organization. Owner practitioner organization. What I mean by owner practitioner, like a hair salon that run by hairstylists, or dry cleaner that run by a person who owns it, right? They don't have such a big team. They have a smaller team, and usually, given their need of saving money, they work with a family member or people in their own nationality or race or culture. It makes it easier for them to deal with this differentiation. As we go through the bigger company, we suggest to supervisors to have more empathy. That is where training on emotional intelligence and self-awareness coming in. I have done that with the 5th largest meatpacking company here in Pennsylvania, in the United States, and dealing with over 1,000 people. And what we start with was working with supervisors first. They are different generations, older generation on age of 60, 50, forget about it. I tell them what to do. They have to do it or else. You come into supervisors in the age of 40 to 30, they are less militant and a little bit more compassionate and try to resolve things with communication. And you come to younger ones, they are literally very timid to deal with people because they haven't dealt with their own self-awareness yet. They haven't owned the position of authority over people. So I find working with the emotional intelligence with a lot of examples on the workplace make a difference for supervisors to understand how to bring people together. And what is so critical here is we understand as a trainers that this is not a one-time event. This is not like a happening in in hollow, in hell, what do you call it, in a moment, and you don't have to let it go. You have to let it go and it grow by itself. That's why I tell owners this is a every quarter kind of thing training. You have to keep talking about it. You have to go back and ask the supervisor examples on the court, on the field, examples of how this emotional intelligence training or how these disciplines in this book and competencies work, what did work, what didn't work. So it's not a one-time event for bigger organizations. And it's so hard to pinpoint what needed and how to. It's just building the relationship mostly based off respect and understanding that different cultures have a different way of showing or receiving respect, different culture, different race category, different age category, have different understanding of how to express their needs to their supervisors or receiving it.
As you were sharing, I remember I was working with someone which they were still out of school within the first couple of years. They were working their first jobs. They were working in mostly family-owned mom and pop businesses, which they were hired. Some of them got really traumatized because, as you said, when you have a small unit, then you bring your culture into your work, and this person was completely traumatized. And when she went into a bigger corporation, which the HR regulated some of the ways that these interactions were, she's actually flourished because
yes,
that specific culture of that family and the way that they spoke with her just didn't settle well. So a little bit of an open concept, which had the empathic and kind of onboarding system and creating a system where the person not only could learn the company, but also bring their creativity in there, really supported that person. I also remembered when you were talking about this concept of it's not a one-time ordeal and similar. I remember when I had my agency, it was also this concept of, how, again, because I'm a family therapist, I bring a lot of these things on a parallel process. How a child thinks that their parents are God and goddesses, and then they grow up a little bit, and then they become a teenager and they defy it. And then at one point they become an adult, and it's like they're now like they already know that they know better than more than their parents. And sometimes you also see this in a supervisor's role, where when somebody comes in, they're holding their supervisor in a space where they want to learn from them. And I think the relationship also changes within the time and that they've learned what they needed to learn. And I also think it's the quality of the supervisor to understand this and not get into a power struggle. And I remember I've had that where the therapists who came to work with me, they were at school. I was, the God Almighty who was giving them all the information. And at one point, they needed to individuate and be who they are. And at one point, they needed to tell me that they knew more than me. And this concept of the internal process and recognizing and then honoring the space is very important. And then people just kind of leave. They need to move on after a couple of years or 6 months or whatever to the next level. And I think those are when the interrelational skills and emotional intelligence is so important. Dr. Rothwell, you working?
I was going to say that I have a story to tell about that. Years ago, when I was an HR practitioner in a large company, I had occasion, there was a situation where the supervisor in one of our departments called me in a panic. And she said, I've got one of my employees on the phone, and she just went home. She took the half a day off. She went home at lunchtime, and she found her husband passed out drunk on the floor, and she couldn't find her two toddlers, her two small children. So she was in a panic. And she opened the refrigerator, and there were the two children. And the first thing this woman did was, rather than call 911, she called her supervisor at work to ask what to do.
Wow.
Now, and my answer was, at the time, I said, for God's sake, call 911. But everyone, the woman and the supervisor, were so panicked by the situation, they weren't thinking clearly. But the point to my story is that sometimes, because our family institutions in the US and in some other countries, our family institutions are broken, that very often the supervisor becomes the mother or the father of their employees, sometimes not by their choice at all, but because that's the only person that the worker can look up to and get not just work advice from, but life advice. And the story I just shared, is an example of where that actually happened. The supervisor was a 50-year-old woman. The worker was a 19-year-old girl. And so when she found her children in the refrigerator and her husband passed out, who did she think to call? She didn't call her mother. She didn't call her father. She didn't call 911. She called her supervisor. So sometimes people look up to their supervisors as the closest thing they might have to a parent. And we can all say that's a terrible thing that our society has turned into that, but it's a reality.
And that Dr. Rothwell, that speaks very loud about two things: is that supervisor's relationship with the worker was so in the depth, so good. Kudos for the supervisor who become a trusting person, right, for this person. And that speaks to how a company can build up and train the supervisors to be that person, be an advisor, be a trusting, reflecting wall that people can go to. And that is, again, bringing us to relatedness, empathy, compassion, respect, communication. As we talk about this, Dr. Foojan, if you notice, for example, this book title is Inclusive, Empathetic, and Relational Supervisor. But if you look at the table of content, we were talking about working among the teams, communication, human resources, staffing, human relations, motivation, delegation, conflict resolution, disciplinary process, and many other things that goes under umbrella of how to be empathetic and relational. So it's just not one or two, three competencies in each book. Under each main competencies in the title, there is many other sub-competencies that design to prepare a supervisor to lead successfully.
Yes, I saw discussions about power distance or individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty, avoidance or long-term orientation versus short-term orientation. You know, people who are traditionalist or silent generation, kind of like baby boomers or Generation X or millennials or, you know, Generation Y or Z, which they act very differently. Their set of entitlements are different. Their communications are different. You know, you have a section about effective communication and how the point is you got to become aware of all these pieces so that you could have the effective communication. Because if you're not aware of all of these kind of you know, background concepts and conversations that are happening constantly, then you're going to take one style and you're going to have that one style with everyone, and then you're going to get resistance, and you don't know why you're getting resistance unless you're really aware of these different delicate matters which each human being has, and you as a supervisor has to be open to seeing it and then have the emotional intelligence so that You know that you're not taking it personal, but you're looking at how to deal with them and how then to be empathetic and, work with them from that perspective. It's a wealth of information.
The point I try to make, and I always say that to top executives, CEOs of company, is like you find your team thirsty, but then you bringing us in, and you want us to open a 4 inches pressure fire hose on them and give them all this information in 2 sessions. And they're like, okay, you're good. No, it takes time. That's the point, that this kind of thing is ongoing training, ongoing input. And I always tell them how to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. One quarter, we talk about these competencies. Next quarter, we talk about other competencies. But unfortunately, some of the top executives, they don't want to spend money. They don't want to spend time. They don't want to spend their resources to actually get this training going on. And it takes us a little bit work to explain all these things to them, that just reading a book make not depth difference. Practice, 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 and practice.
Yeah, I was going to add that I used to run a high potential program in a big company, and we would put people through a management trainee experience. And in that experience, they had to spend 4 months in 3 of our company divisions, one division at a time. And then half a day a week, they would get formal training where they would all come together as a group and talk about some of the challenges they had faced and get coaching as a group and individually on how to cope with some of the problems that they faced daily on the job. In that program, we had 0 turnover. People stuck with the company and they found that program. We placed, I think in a 5-year time span, I only lost 1 person, and that person went to another company for a promotion. So it all has to do with how willing the managers of the company are to invest in the quality of the supervisors they have in the organization. And today it's even more complicated, as you said at the beginning, Dr. Zeine, that supervisors have to deal not just face to face with workers, but quite often they have to deal with some people who are on site, some people who are working virtually, and some people who are on some kind of floating 3 days a week, 2 days a week, 3 days a week in the company, 2 days a week online. And it can be very confusing. And particularly during the pandemic, we learned that a lot of supervisors and managers and executives had trouble learning how to manage online. They didn't know how to do it. And we saw that because the suicide rates nationally skyrocketed. There was a loneliness epidemic that still exists, and that's contributing to that suicide rate. And part of the problem was that supervisors, when they would get online to conduct meetings, they would focus only on the work tasks, and they would forget that there were human beings on the other side of the webcam. And they didn't learn how to balance that the way they could when they were face to face. I could see someone in the hallway, and if I worked with them one-on-one and I saw them in the hallway, I could ask them how their family was. I could invite them out for, beer at the end of the week or something like that. But that didn't happen online. People tended to focus just on the work tasks and didn't talk about each other, about the people. And that contributed to problems. So, as Venom said, supervisors need to be sensitive. And we have to also consider the venue where that supervision is taking place. Is it taking place in on site? Is it taking place online, virtually? Is there some kind of a hybrid relationship? And how does both supervisor and worker adapt to that?
think it's important what you shared. It also brought up, and I know our time is getting short, but it also brought up for me as you were sharing that sometimes people, when they are together in a see each other in the company, there's a lot of personality concepts that happens. You know, people irk each other just the way they talk, or they kind of present their power struggles together, or they compete with each other. So it was interesting that in some of the research it showed that not being together in the office, it minimized a lot of these personality clashes, where they just focused on what the work was. They didn't get involved with each other's personality stuff. It wasn't like you were sitting there and a coworker was standing there having coffee and gossiping with another person, and it would just irk you, it would upset you, or you would hear something. None of this was an issue anymore. So it took away some, but then it missed creating good relationships and healthy relationships and bonds with each other. And it was just, people who were going to do what they were going to do. And another concept that showed up for me as you were talking is supervisors. It's not just how they deal with each supervisee. They have to maintain the relationship between the supervisees. Because again, there's a lot of rivalry that happens. There's competition that happens. There's animosity that happens. There's alliances that happens, two employee against two other ones. And part of an amazing skill that a supervisor has to have is to how to read all of this and align it and create the you have beautiful two sections. One is group and what the dynamic of a group is, and then another one, how to create a team out of this group and how to create different teams out of a group that are there. So it's, as I said, it's a wealth of information that our time obviously is not allowing us to go. So it just makes all of you who are listening to go get the book. That's
Yes.
what you got to do, because we're not going to bring you the whole book in 40 minutes. So the book is The Inclusive, Empathetic, and Relational Supervisor, Managing Diverse Employees Through Interpersonal Relationships, by Dr. Bakhshandeh, Dr. William Rothwell, and Dr. Eileen Zabelero, which is not here with us, but she has been on our show talking about your other books, and I'm sure she'll be back on our show with your future books. Is there anything we haven't shared? And I know there's so much in the books, there's a wealth of information, but is there anything that you want our audience to know at this time that we haven't shared? So if each one of you can take 1 minute and say on your mind.
Yeah, I like the audience to know this is not just the book that came up last year. This is the combination of over almost 80 years of experience, research, and work done by Dr. Rothwell, by me, by Dr. Zabelero. The book is saturated by academic and professional references. This is not just idea we brought from our pocket, and have a lot of tools, a lot of actual day-to-day practices that make a supervisor effective and successful, and invite everyone who purchased the first book, purchase the second book. If we haven't purchased second book yet, purchase both of them together. That would give you the trend of what's coming, and then look forward for the third one that coming early next year. And thank you, Dr. Foojan. You always support our work. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It's great work. Dr. Rothwell?
I would just say that the work of the supervisor is only getting more challenging. We saw it become a quantum leap of difficulty during the pandemic, as we had so many people working at home, and supervisors and workers were not well prepared for that. They had to learn new skills overnight on how to manage and how to work virtually. And a lot of people had no experience with that. They had to gain it. And we see that technology continues on the march as we have artificial intelligence become available. It too is a game changer. It will change how we relate to each other, how we work together, and that too will complicate the job of the supervisor. And it's also the case that many companies, in a bid to save money, are cutting back on the number of executives, managers, frontline supervisors that they have. And that means that a lot of decisions that used to fall to supervisors and to managers and executives end up falling on hourly employees. And many of them are not prepared for that challenge. So our series of books is meant to help people get prepared for that changing landscape that we call a workplace. And I want to thank you, Dr. Zeine, for inviting us to this program.
Beautiful. And where can people find you and your books?
Well, Dr. Rothwell can speak for his company, but people can find me on Primeco, PRIMECO, education.com. And all the books that we wrote is there also. But very easy, Amazon.com and another 75 different platforms offering our books internationally. So finding the book is really not hard.
Yeah, and in terms of finding me, you can look me up. I'm very easy. I have about 5 million hits on Google. So if you did a search, you'd find about 5 million hits to locate me. And I do have a website, Rothwell and Associates Incorporated. It's www.rothwellandassociates.com.
Beautiful.
So again, thank you very much for today's session.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing the time to be with us, and for all of you who are out there, create an amazing life for yourself and everyone around you. And until next week, and until their next book.
Yes, it's coming.
Are you a psychotherapist looking to enhance your practice? The Awareness Integration Therapy, developed by Dr. Foojan Zeine, is a comprehensive guide to the principle and techniques of this powerful therapeutic approach. Join the growing community who have elevated their practice and expanded their skills by embracing Awareness Integration Therapy and witnessing its life-changing impact. Order your copy on Amazon now.